Hi there, welcome to this practice clinic live from my home in sunny Wimbledon. I'm Graham Fitch. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a pianist, I'm a piano teacher, I'm a writer, and I have a popular blog called practicingthepiano.com and an online academy which is a subscription site for pianists and piano teachers. And I'm going to wait just a couple of seconds to make sure we're okay here with hello Naz, nice to see you, that we're okay with the camera being in the right direction and not upside down as it was once before. Orlando, hello. Yes, do let me know where you're calling in or watching from, and hit the like button, hit the wow face. Chia, hello, nice to see you. I think I've got enough people here to start. So let me go ahead and just tell you what we're going to be doing here in this presentation. It's a workshop, but it's a workshop only in the sense that it's me talking. There's nobody else here apart from you. But I have had some questions submitted to me from subscribers with problems that people have had that are practice related, not technical related, but practice related. And the first one is from Niels, who says, I don't really understand the part in the first ebook, that's my first ebook, Practicing the Piano, where you tell about Ebenezer Prout and the phrases he invented to fit with the fugue. How can the subject be remembered by using the phrases? I'm still trying to understand more about what a fugue is, and this is all new to me. So if I can give you, hello Sheila, Raquel, Janet, hi there. If I can give you a few, first of all, let's get the Ebenezer Prout thing out of the way. I mean, you couldn't make that name up, could you? It's not a character from Dickens. He was a musician, hello Bob, musician, an author, an editor. You may know his Handel Messiah. Diana, nice to see you. But he wrote, jokingly I think, some silly little words that were supposed to help you remember the fugue subject. So the C minor fugue from book one, John Sebastian Bach sat upon a tack, but he soon got up again with a howl. Okay, not hysterical, but I think the idea was that you'd remember the fugue subject by those rather silly words. Let's waste a moment talking about this, just really kind of a joke there. Hello, nice to see you, CK. So, what is a fugue? Well, a fugue is a musical form. It's based on counterpoint, so a number of lines that move simultaneously. So we can listen to counterpoint independently, the voices independently, or we can listen to it all together for harmony. And this is really what happens. Now there's a main melody called the subject, which we find over and over again. So if I go back to that fugue subject that I looked at just now, the C minor from book one of the Well-Tempered Clavier of Bach, the master of fugues, and let's have a little look and see what happens in this particular fugue. Well, you've got the subject starts off in the alto voice, and you can play it with the right hand or the left hand, whichever you want. So we've got there no markings from Bach as to whether that should be legato, staccato. Most people think of this as a polonaise flavoured piece where you've got a jump. So I noticed this mordant-like idea comes back 3 times, and there's a little tail on the end. So when that alto voice is finished saying its thing, hello Joshua, when that alto voice is finished with the subject, it carries on with what's known as the counter subject, which is usually different in design and character from the subject. And then the next voice, sitting in the wings as it were, the soprano, has the subject now, but in a different key. That's in G minor, isn't it? The dominant key. Jenny, hello. Now let's have a look and see what happens after that. Well, so far we've had 2 voices out of the 3 say their bit. Well, in those those two bars, Bach is kind of noodling around with the material. He's just giving a little snippet of the subject, isn't he? But not the whole subject. Then another one. And what does the alto voice do? It says, I'm going to sit and practice a few scales here. So that's my alto voice. And that's a little episode. I call it a commercial break between subjects. And then the bass has to come in with its subject here. Now while the bass is doing its thing, we have the counter subject in the alto voice, which is just finished, isn't it? No, sorry, the soprano voice. And now all three voices have said their thing. They've had the fugue subject, and the exposition comes to a close. Hello, Michael. Hello, Karen. What happens after that? Well, every fugue is different after that, but usually what a composer do will be to develop the material that he's given us so far, using all sorts of fugal devices. We've got episodes which are based on the material without actually being the material. So if we look at this next episode here, the subject in the key of E flat, which is the relative major. It has a different character. But before that, there had been a little dialogue between the top two voices. Do you hear the conversation there? What a nice day we're having. Yes, it is, isn't it? How are you doing? I'm fine. How are you? I'm fine too. It's that kind of thing. It's a dialogue where they both agree. And underneath the cello line is he's also just practicing some scales. Meandering through some scale patterns in semiquavers, 16th notes. But then when we come back to the subject in E flat major, as I say, we've got a different character. But let's address a little bit about how we might practice a fugue. Well, I'm going to take a small section. In fact, I'm only going to take 2 bars. And I'm going to play one voice at a time. Let me start with my top voice. I'm in bar, let me just give you the bar number. Let me take it from the beginning of bar 7. There's my soprano line. Now I'm using the fingering that I would use were I playing the other notes in that right hand, which I wouldn't be doing that fingering if I didn't have to play those other notes. Now let me see what the alto sounds like by itself. So I could take it from the last beat here. Notice that's divided between the hands, that line, the left hand. So when you're looking at the middle line, we often have to negotiate which hand is it that's actually playing it, which finger is it that's playing it. Hi Richard, nice to see you. Over lunch, oh Richard's having lunch, okay. And John, hi John. So what I have not done my bass yet, have I? Actually, I didn't really do my alto. I got distracted by Richard's lunch. Now that bar, that's a good example of some weird fingering. Were I to play both voices together in the right hand, I would need to use thumb, 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 2, thumb, 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 a whole row of thumbs, which we obviously wouldn't do that if we didn't have another part to play on the top. So fugues do give us some logistical problems that we have to overcome. Now let me play my bass line just for the sake of completion. Now when I'm ready to put that together, I don't practice fugues hands separately, although we can do that, but I would rather think of it as strands separately, or voices. Hello Jenny. So having done each voice singly, let me put together the soprano voice with the bass. Now how about I do the bass line with my alto? myself cheating there. I didn't do the fingering that I should have done. It's hard for me to do that with that fingering. I wouldn't want to use that fingering. So I would have to make sure I got that right. There we go. Now finally I get it. So this is the process of practicing a fugue. There's one more thing you can do. Hi Rob, hi Frankie. One more thing you can do very usefully in a fugue, and that would be to solo out a given voice and practice it forte, and the other two voices piano or pianissimo if you want. Now that's especially difficult with the middle voice, so let me do that rather slowly. Do you see how that works? That gives me a chance to listen and really focus my ear on that middle strand, and also to control the sound. I wouldn't want to play it that way, but I would want to practice it that way. So fugue practice is very, I think I really enjoy practicing a fugue because it's kind of step by step by step by step. But if you want to know more about fugues, do have a look online. There's plenty of good information about fugues and what a fugue is. And there was one thing that's quite well known. Glenn Gould wrote, "So you want to write a fugue for voices and a small ensemble with words." It's very clever, it's very funny, and it's very educational. Have a look at that. John, can you, John says, Graham, can you offer practice suggestions for a tricky passage of right-hand 16th notes in the rondo of Beethoven's third piano concerto? That's this. Right. He's trying to get it up to a performance speed of 110 beats per minute. I struggle with the triplets in bars 115 to 17. My teacher and I have worked out a comfortable fingering and I can accurately practice little bits fast. Let's get on to that in a second. Niels, oh yes, good. Glad you appreciated that response. Thanks, Niels. Where was I with this? Yeah, but when I try to put it all together at tempo with the left hand, I trip up, usually in bar 116. How would you approach the practice of this section? Well, let's have a little look and see what the section is. So we've got a piano solo there. The orchestra is doing nothing much, just pa, this, a dominant seventh, right? And the piano has a kind of playful series of triplets on the top of that. So the first thing I'm struck by here with this is the design feature. Look what he does. He goes up, then he comes down to another high point, then he comes down again. Where am I? So, John, if you haven't already found contours for this, this passage, I would do so, because you don't want to feel that all these triplets are equal. It'll sound very heavy and very mechanical, and it won't be joyous, it won't be playful. So I would tend to want to go with, make a mini crescendo upwards, go for that note, back down. So the last beat of that first bar, really light. Now you could back off again here. What is it? And make another one there. See what I did there? So the last beat of that second bar, the bar that you said you struggled with, you might want to begin a new sub-phrase. Yes. It is awkward. It's awkward to see, because he's playing rhythmical games with us here. He's deliberately fudging where the bar lines are, or where the beat should fall against the note should fall against the beat. But let's look at, you asked about practice. Let me give you a few more specific practice thoughts about this. Given its speed, I would avoid doing too much slow practice. Now, when you start working on this, I know you're probably well into it, but if you should be starting your practice, journey on this section, I would start off staccato with really clear fingertips, this articulate tip. Slightly firmer than piano. This kind of idea, individuated movements of the fingertips. Now, at the same time as I'm doing that, my arm is gliding serenely behind my hand. Don't know if you remember hovercrafts. I'm showing my age when I talk about hovercrafts. Boats with a cushion of air underneath. And the cushion of air allowed the boat to sort of float across the ocean, and you weren't aware of any kind of turbulence or anything. So if you think about the arm as being like a hovercraft behind the hand, there's zero tension here. So staccato touch. Now it's starting to come back into my hand now. It's a while since I played this concerto, but it's starting to come back to me. It is tricky. I remember having issues with this as a student. So then, having done individuated finger from the tip, the staccato from the tip, I would then start to work in units, groups, maybe this. Really fast. So that was from beat 1 to beat 2, but supposing I started and I grouped it instead of from the first note. See what I'm doing now? I've extended my reach, so instead of just one group of 3 notes, I've got a group of 6 notes. But I could equally use accents and stress. I still want to use my staccato touch. Accent every 3rd note, then every 6th note. Right, now you could, if you wanted to, and this is a really good idea for practice, shift where you put the accent. So instead of putting it on the first beat, put it on the second, well, I should say the first note of each group. Start to put it on the 2nd note. Right, and then on the 3rd note. If you come from the rigorous English tradition, I'm sure it's not only English, but the rigorous English tradition would expect you to group that then in groupings of 4s. It's grouped in 3s, but let's group it in 4s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's starting on the first note of a group of 4. Supposing we started on the last note of a group of 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. You'd go through that until you'd exhausted all the possibilities of 4 groups, and then you would move to 5 groups, and 6 groups it already is. 7 groups of 7. All of these things are possibilities for practice. But I must say I'm much more in favour of something that builds chains. Hello Sharon. So we could do a chain starting off just 3, let's say 3 notes. Simple, yes? Maybe not. 4 notes. 5 notes. 6 notes. And really finesse. Make sure those are all even before you go on to that. Not even at the end. Notice I'm stopping for a moment and asking my servants, my fingers, to be even at the end, rather than just banging away at it again without thinking. I'm saying, what was it that I didn't like about my last repetition? Well, it was that my 3rd and 4th fingers were not coordinated. Do you see how it works? And then you'd slowly build your chain up at the tempo that you would use, and then I would start a new chain, perhaps from the 3rd. It happens to be the 2nd beat, the 3rd group. So, and I'd work on that until I were really happy that it sounded good, felt good, and was at the speed that I wanted. And then I'd slowly work my way forwards through that. Those are some of the things I would suggest doing. Of course you can use rhythm groups as well. Different rhythmical groupings are always useful. provided they're done mindfully, thoughtfully, and well. You know, and then, but when you look at rhythmical groupings like that, they're not too dissimilar to the controlled stops I was doing before. Hello Margaret, thank you very much for your comment. As for the broken octaves at the end, which I think all of us struggle with, there is a cheat version which I've seen plenty of people do, which is where you play. So instead of playing broken octaves like this, we play left hand as a solid octave, followed by the right, known as blind octaves. So that, with a big modern orchestra on a big modern piano in a big hall, is probably not a terrible crime to do it that way. You'd be surprised how many people are doing that, and it actually sounds much stronger. Broken octaves are very hard in that spot, I know, because I've struggled with them myself over the years. So Susan, let's move to Susan. I tried playing closer to tempo for a piece I'd worked on for a few months, and found if I could use the same finger in both hands at a few key points, it was easier to coordinate and find the right notes. Should I work on being able to use any finger of one hand with any finger of the other hand, or is it okay to make these sorts of adjustments to fingering when I find them useful? Well, the first thing to say is fingering is a very personal thing, and there's no right or wrong. When it comes, I'm getting a question here from David. I agree, but why use them? I'm not sure what you mean. Rhythm or what? Maybe we can come back to that. There's no such thing as the one perfect fingering for everybody. You know, you've got to look at the addition that you're using and say, is this fingering good for me? If not, don't be in the least bit scared to change it to something that does work for you. I often recommend to my students, if they're struggling with fingering between lessons, simply go to IMSLP, the Petrucci library, and find out as many sources as you can, and just compare the fingering that this editor comes up with, this editor comes up with. I think the problem is when we look at Vortex scores, particularly, you know, I happen to have sitting around always the Henle edition of anything. Now the fingering there is no more distinguished than the fingering for any other edition. In fact, sometimes the Henle fingerings, particularly the old ones, are not very, I don't personally think particularly good. Some of them are great, some of them are not so good. So what you do is you come up with a fingering that works for yourself, and I don't think there's any real rules. But to get back to Susan's, there are guidelines, but there's no hard and fast rule. Susan's question here, she's saying, I think I've dragged out your examples. You were looking at, let me see, the piece in question is Beethoven Opus 6, piano 4 hands, primo, and Susan's given me a bar number, where she wants to land on 2/3 fingers there, which I think is a very, absolutely fine. Why not land on 2/3 fingers there? That would, for me, work very well. What Susan had said earlier is, that, no, actually she says it a little bit later, about working up slowly, from a slow tempo to a faster tempo, a few notches at a time. Which would mean if you were starting off with that passage slowly, let's say you could use, David's asked a question about accents and rhythms. Yeah, well, let's not get too much into that now. Maybe if we've got a bit of time afterwards, we can come and talk about that. It's a polemic question in piano teaching, this rhythms thing. Some teachers insist on it, other teachers are nowhere near it. The problem with it is it's in danger of becoming very mechanical. So if we use it sensibly and do it well, like anything else, it can serve us. If we're a slave to it, it can cause all sorts of problems. If we do it wrong or badly, we can cause tension. So it's one of those things that is going to cause fights whenever it comes up, I'm afraid. But let me get back to this. So let's say Susan has managed to learn it at this speed. And can manage that, no problem. The incremental metronome approach would be to log what tempo you could play that at a metronome, and then just inch that forwards gradually until you can get it up to the speed. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a bit time consuming, and I personally don't think it's the best way. My feeling is to do little bits fast, as we were doing earlier. Just a chain, so make a chain. 2 notes at the speed. 3 notes. Add another note until you can get, now I've got to the last beat. Maybe I'll go over the bar line now. So I've now worked up 1 bar at the speed I want. Then I can start a new chain. And let's not be pedantic. You might find note by note by note not necessary. You might want to go group by group or hand group. So maybe just that. And back. And now I want to put my thumb on the B at the end of the bar there. So I might want to stop on that B and just make sure I'm balanced on those fingers. Yeah. So that I can really feel the thumb there on that B, and then go over the bar line. And again, make sure that when I stop, that I'm really free in my arms. There's no tension anywhere, not holding anything. If you think about what a rhythm does, we could actually think of a rhythm as being 2 notes at the fast speed, interspersed by a slow note. And that could be very useful. I don't see any problem with doing that in something that's going to move at that speed. Then you'd invert that rhythm. Make sure that you're free there, you see. See, I'm getting sort of all sorts of wows coming up at me now. So some people are saying, yes, I like this. But I've got to do it well. So what does doing it well actually mean? Well, first of all, there can't be any tension when you get to the long note. That's got to be immediately loose. When I say loose, that no pushing down into the keyboard, no key bedding. So I'm just sitting there balanced on my 2 E's there. Also, when I say to do it well, rhythmically, the speed of that unit has to match the speed of that unit. So if I'm doing this one fast and this one sluggishly, that's going to do me no good whatsoever. May as well not bother with it. The other thing, there was another thing I was going to say about that. Yeah, so it's got to feel good in the body. It's got the group's got to match. I know what it was I was going to say. If you're doing the short-long rhythm, see if you can put the stress on the first note, the short note. I'm checking in with my body on each long note. There's a lot of value in that. A lot of value in that. Now the next rhythm I could do, well, 2 slow notes, 4 quick ones, and then change that around. So that both the rhythms and the chaining are useful practice tools to know about and to use sensibly. But just going back to that 3rd finger arrival, see, I would want to make I think a very important observation here. If you've got technical issue with that, no amount of rhythm practice is going to solve it. Or rather, it may not solve it, it may not touch it. So the technical problem there, I'm noticing Susan maybe is struggling. I don't know Susan, I don't know what her issues are other than what she's told me, but see, I would want to feel a rotation from my thumb to my 3rd finger there in both hands. That would enable me to go over the bar line with the greatest of ease and comfort. So the other question Susan had was, fingering question, was this spot here. Oh no, hang on, where is it? Yeah, here it is. She likes to go to a 3 and a 1 and a 1 and a 3 there, so that both hands are playing the same pairs of notes there. 1 and a 3, that's fine, no problem at all. I'm hearing horns and woodwinds here. You could equally move to a 2-4-4-2 there, because you've got a slur move. I don't think I'd use a 3-5 there. I think I'd want to go to a thumb 3, so I'm in position for that. So again, there's no one right fingering for that passage either. And it's a question of experimenting until you find the one that serves you best. Orlando has 2 questions. First question. I enjoy doing some scales and exercises as part of my practice regime. My right hand is more adept than my left. I think that's true of all of us. We've got a dominant hand. It might be the right and it might be the left. Although I can see the point of exercising left hand and right hand together at the same time, my right hand can go faster. Wouldn't it make sense to extend the skill of the right hand by giving it more difficult exercises, faster exercises, rather than holding it back at the left hand speed? So this is a really good question. First, this is a humorous response, but if you're practicing scales this way, you could confuse yourself by crossing the hands, and then you've got your left hand now becomes your right hand, and you might trick your brain into thinking that this is actually your right hand because you're used to hearing it that way. That's one slightly amusing suggestion. But I do think if you're going to do exercises, I'm a great believer in symmetrical inversion. And I've got here in front of me a little set of reflective keyboard studies by Vincent Persichetti, which I think are wonderful. And what this does is it relies on the symmetry of the keyboard. If you notice that the keyboard is symmetrical in 2 places, A flat and D. So if I were to play a chromatic scale outwards from A flat, wherever I have a white note here, I've got a white note in that hand. Black note, white, white. And I can do the same thing from a D. So if you've got an exercise where the one hand is doing an exact mirror image of the other hand simultaneously, you'll find that the supposed weak hand is learning from, or is able to learn from, the supposed strong hand. This is the Persichetti. I'll play a little bit of it. What I like about that is that it's got marks of expression in there, that's got hairpins, and I think it's actually a rather interesting little thing, isn't it? The left hand is doing exactly the same thing as the right hand. Oh yes, David says, where did you get a copy of the fingering exercises? Do you mean the Persichetti ones? Well, I had to send away. Funnily enough, they came from America. I really like them. They're fantastic. So anything you might practice here, you could use your rhythm practice here, couldn't you? You could use your accent practice here, but the left hand and the right hand are doing the same job. So let's say you've got a piece that you're struggling with that involves your weaker hand. Let's say you're practicing the revolutionary, right, and you're finding that hand is not as strong as you'd like it to be. You could consider making a symmetrical inversion of that and play it in the other hand. So how does this work? It happens to start on an A flat. So it's actually, yes, A flat, a C minor. That would be the symmetrical inversion of the opening of the revolutionary Etude of Chopin. And you could, anything you were practicing in the left hand, let's say you were doing your rhythms there, you could do, hi Mel, you could do that in the other hand as well. What that does is the right hand being your, let's say it's your stronger hand, once you've formulated the, see, that feels to me the same as the left hand does in the beginning, because it is the same. In the brain, it's the same. It's a mirror image of that. So then, if my right hand is stronger than my left, I can call upon the strength of my right hand to teach, to assist my left hand. Do you see how that works? There's an interval of a third, the black note there. And there was a little spot in the Mendelssohn Variation Sérieuse, which I was playing a couple of years back, which for some reason was tying me up in knots, even though I'd practiced it all sorts of other ways. I just wanted something else to, you know, help a bit. So I discovered the inversion. So if I was struggling with this hand, it meant that I wasn't really sure what was going on in this hand. So in other words, what was causing me problems were reflected down there. It doesn't always sound so great. Marc-André Hamelin practices like this. You can see it in a YouTube video. I've written quite a bit about it on my blog, practicingthepiano.com. You can find about symmetrical inversion there. I hope that addresses question 1, Orlando. Question 2. In the last couple of years, I've memorized most of my music as part of the learning process so that I really get inside the music. Yes, absolutely. He says it's terribly hard work. A couple of months later, yes, it is. It is. A couple of months later, I cannot even begin to play it from memory. Well, I don't need to keep up my repertoire like a pro pianist, so am I simply wasting time and energy memorizing? Never. As far as I'm concerned, you're never wasting time and energy memorizing, because memorization. Oh, here is Orlando now about the mirror image. He says it's really interesting advice about the mirror image. Blah blah. I can't see. I will order the Persichetti. Yes, great. And there's another set of exercises by Rudolf Ganz called Contemporary and Special. Quite sure what's so special about them. I think he means special, which you can't get you can't order them, but you can find online. They're a little old-fashioned for me. I don't really like all these exercises and studies. Why not just work on music? Oh, I was going to suggest, there was another thing I was going to suggest to you, which was to work on music, left hand alone music. I don't know if you have the Scriabin Prelude and Nocturne. There's a beautiful set of 3 pieces by Frank Bridge called 3 Improvisations. Really, totally gorgeous. Frank Bridge being Benjamin Britten's teacher. So rather than working on loads of dry exercises, work on something that has artistic meaning. So that you're working on sound, you're working on something that's going to engage your mind, your soul, your spirit, rather than going through those Behrens exercises. You could go through some of the Behrens exercises, why not? But I wouldn't harp on them. Second question about, yes, deep learning. Memorization is really deep learning. It's the same thing. So let's say you're memorizing something. What you're really doing, even if you don't play it from memory in the end, you are deep learning it very deeply. A few of the memory techniques I wished I'd done more of as a student. I'm just randomly going here. You know, a lot of the memory work involves mental work. So in other words, what's the design of the music? Well, I noticed that there are 3 lines there. There's a 4th that goes up there, and at the same time there's a bass line. Oh, there's that 4th that goes up. Oh, there's that 4th that goes down. Now the 2 voices are going in contrary motion. This hand goes up in a chord, an arpeggio. That goes down as a scale. They come up. There they agree with each other on the E flat. Ah, how nice. Agreement. Disagreement. Pulling out here. So I would get that in my brain as I'm practicing, and then test it out with 2 fingers, 1 finger in each hand. Make it sound as good as you can. Sing inside, sing like mad inside, and then just, this is gonna. transpose. If you've got a passage that's difficult or you're struggling with, consider transposing it from memory. Ah, I've got all the hearts going there. Yeah, consider transposing from memory. Now that's a skill that you need to develop. It won't be necessarily easy come, but you can develop it. If you don't have that skill, consider learning a very simple piece like this. And just being able to play that in any key. I don't know. And it doesn't have to be for whole pieces, it could be problem places. There's all sorts of other memory tools that I use in my own memorization and my own teaching, which are on my blog. You'll find them there. So it's you're never wasting time. There's another memory tool that I particularly like, which is to take, you know, let's say you've got two hands, one hand playing two lines. Can you divide that up? Let the upper hand play the top line and the lower hand playing the lower line. Switch that around. This is fun. You know, this brings variety to practice, and it brings depth to practicing, even if in the end you don't play from memory. So I wouldn't worry about, am I going to be able to play it from memory, but I would use the memory tools for deep learning. Let's move on. Right, okay, so Anne says, I have trouble getting rid of all the minor mistakes in a piece. How do I learn and polish a piece so it's perfect without any wrong notes? I'm in my late 60s and just picked up playing piano again. First time practicing regularly since high school. I'm really enjoying it. But I've come to realise my foundation is not as solid as I would like. I'm currently working on Pathétique Movement 1 and Romance number 1 and 2 by Clara Schumann. Right, well what I've done is I've got a little clip of the Pathétique Sonata and I pulled out a segment that, just to illustrate a few things for you. And this, oh, I can't even see it now. Let me see if I can enlarge that. Yeah, okay. It's the section from bar 93, which often gets people tied up. That spot there. So if you want to get that, as you say, note perfect, my philosophy with this is you start off at the speed of no mistakes. The speed of no mistakes, as in, how can I manage this with everything beautifully organized? It might be as slowly as this. Rachmaninoff used to practice so slowly that colleagues didn't recognize the piece he was practicing. No, I'm in the wrong spot. Hear every atom, every molecule of the music. Enjoy each finger contact with the keyboard. You see, notice I'm doing also dynamic variety there. I'm making these accents stronger. I'm able to do that because I'm able to think about every note, every finger before I play it. So my feeling is it's rather like the Three Little Pigs. I wrote a blog post on this subject too. The Three Little Pigs, the last of which built his house out of bricks and dug deep foundations before building upwards. And what that tends to do is to make the final product so secure. But of course people don't want to do that. The first two little pigs couldn't be bothered with that. And what happened when the big bad wolf came along? Their houses were blown down with a huff and a puff, I think it was, wasn't it? A couple of breaths, huff and a puff. So if you've experienced this situation where, you know, you can play it okay by yourself, but as soon as you play it in front of other people, it falls down. Maybe ask yourself, did you dig down first before you tried to build up? I've coined the phrase the 3 S's. It's my basics of practicing, which is slowly, separately, and that could be hands separately or strands separately, elements separately, and then in sections. People tend to do much too big of a chunk of music. The brain will simply not hold it. the working memory will not hold it. So how could I apply sections, how could I apply separately to this? Well, obviously hand separately, that's a no-brainer. But what about this line? The staccato notes, the ones that are marked with staccato, why not extract that first? That would be a way of practicing separately. And you might think, well, how can that be separately? You're playing two hands together. Well, I'm missing out this element. So what I could then do would be to play the remainder of that as a block, as a hand block. Right? And then I could apply some of the techniques that I used earlier to this, which would be groupings. Sounds suspiciously like a rhythm, doesn't it? Well, this is where rhythms and groupings can overlap, because really all I'm doing is I'm stopping on these accented notes. And then there's an impulse, a fast impulse that takes me to the next note. And if I wanted to take that one step further, why not stop on the second note of each group? Yeah. And if I wanted to develop a little bit of more freedom with my rotations, I could take each pair and play it twice. There's all sorts of possibilities for practice. I could block one hand and play the other hand, and then I'd want to do that the other way around. So this is all what I call good practice. Practice isn't just sitting there repeating something over and over and over and over again until you hope that it yields. Often it won't, and you'll get so frustrated with that. But think of that third little pig who dug down and did everything beautifully. Building standards were involved in that every step of the way. I pulled out, actually, I didn't go for the first two romances of Clara Schumann because I thought, well, if you haven't learned number 3, you probably really want to learn number 3. It's the most beautiful thing. Clara must have had huge hands. I've just got the first part of this now. This is what it sounds like slowly, just so you can feel that kind of spinning right hand. It feels very close in spirit to Mendelssohn. But if I were beginning this piece and I wanted to have this comfort and security, foundation digging, if I bring my pig number 3 persona into this, I might first of all start off by not worrying about all of these right hand notes, but have a look and see what's going on in the left hand. And I might take 2 hands immediately to what's going on in the left hand so that I can make a map of it easily. It's not difficult for me to play the content of the left hand using 2 hands. It's much harder to do it with the one hand, because then I've got to think about pivots over the second finger and all of that palaver. But I can start off by actually just blocking it out. And I'm attracted by that sort of 007 chromatic. She repeats it exactly. 4 bars are the same, and then she seems to do something different. Chromatic, well, not chromatic actually. Notice how I'm singing. I can't resist singing, because when I sing, it goes into my body in another way. When I wiggle fingers, it goes in through my motor. Hello, Ingrid from Ballarat. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. You know, when I sing it, it goes into my body in another way. It goes into my ear in another way. So I can't stop myself from singing. And then maybe I'll break it up. And then I'll start to work on the left hand. Let's say I was was struggling with that pattern in the left hand, with the movements from 5 to the top. Let's say I could, if I was aware of what was going on, if I was able to self-diagnose, which is really what we want to aim toward, I would notice that I need my second finger as a pivot for the hand to go back from 5 to 1. You see what I'm doing there? So I could hold down my second finger first. You see how that works, and then now I might be ready to go to my right hand, and I would see a whole load of 16th notes, semiquavers. And rather than just sit there and struggle with that and wonder why I can't play it fast, I would start off seriously slowly with one finger. Now, why one finger? Plus my voice. You can hear I'm not a singer, but I don't mind having a go. I'm a musician, so therefore I can sing. So can everybody who's a musician sing to some extent or other. The benefit of doing it with one finger is that it shows me the direction of the line. It shows me the contour of the line. So when I'm playing a white key, I notice my arm is here. When I play a black key, I have to move up to get to it. So that shows me, it shows my brain, oh, there's a white, black, white, white, black, white, black, then it's chromatic. So do you see I've got a pattern going there? I somewhere in there perceive black, white, the pattern of black, whites. Also, if I've got bigger intervals here, the movement of my arm is quicker. So then I'm perceiving intervals as well, physically. So it's ear, it's also physical. Do you see how that works? When I've got my hand out there, I don't necessarily have to move anything other than my fingers. I wouldn't do it that way. I would always be moving behind. But it's a good way to start. And then you'd have to organize a good fingering. I put something in here quickly for myself. And I'm noticing the designs. And I'm playing it as a melodic line. And let's say I couldn't play both hands together quite yet. I could play my bass note, couldn't I? In other words, just the foundation bass. There, the bass moves. And that would probably be enough. That's a small enough chunk of music. Small 4-bar phrase. Then I could play with my fingering, I could play detached, staccato from the tip of my finger. When I say play, I mean practice. Because when you think about what this is going to be at speed, I might learn this, it's actually a gorgeous piece. At speed, each note is going to last that long, isn't it? So if I practice at a slow tempo, but with the key speed that I would use at performance tempo, and the dynamic, I've got that result. And then after that, well, we've already talked about chaining, and I can see from the clock that I should probably get a bit of a move on here. There's 1,001 things I could add to that Clara Schumann example as a way of starting off the learning process, the deep learning process from day one. But one thing I didn't say, and I probably should have, is do some homework first. Find out what this piece is all about, what the romances are all about, what was Clara doing the time she wrote it, what was going on in her life at the time she was writing this piece. Anything you can come up with that deepens your appreciation intellectually about what you want to do with the music will help you. Otherwise, we're in danger of just wiggling fingers. Finally, Sheila has asked here, Sheila, I would like help on how to learn and practice the left-hand broken chords arpeggios in the second section bar 83 onwards, of Liszt's Romance in E minor. Excuse me, and how to subsequently increase the speed. Thank you. Well, okay, so this is the section. This lovely section. I'm missing a bit here. Do you see what's going on there? What I first did was not to go to the left hand, because I have noticed when people get fixated, I'm not saying Sheila is, but people will get fixated on a difficult left hand. And when I ask them to play their other hand, the right hand, Hector, hello. Problem with my left hand when doing ascending scales. Hold that thought. I can't see the bottom of your comment, so hold that thought. And if we've got a moment at the end, I'll get to it. If not, I'll answer it later in the comments section. You know, the temptation is to go straight down to the left hand, but have you got your right hand beautifully formed? Very often if I ask a student who says, oh, I need help with this left hand, they won't have done any practice on the right hand because they're spending all their time on the left hand. So I would tend to start here. You can even use two hands. Have you got a beautiful shape for that? How is your timing? How is your intonation there? Have you organized this? If not, then I would suggest starting there, starting with the right hand. You probably didn't want to hear that because you think, oh no, I want to know about the left hand. Well, the fingering in this particular edition, I don't like so much, but if you look at what the left hand's doing, I'm going to use the fingering that I came up with. Happens not to be in my fingers, but I had a little look at it this morning and discovered that really the best way to learn it, or best way to be sure of this whole section, is to memorize it. You can't really be playing this looking up and down, you'll get yourself seasick. So if you take, first of all, just analyze what's going on in the left hand. You've got hand blocks, the bass by itself, then you've got three notes together that make a triad, E minor, and there's E minor triad again. So if you want to be really specific, and the more specific you can be, the better. That's an E minor triad in its last inversion, its second inversion. Here's an E minor triad in its first inversion. The next bar looks like it's going to do the same, but it doesn't. The last position is higher. It's actually the second inversion replayed up here. And he does that twice in a row. You see, I'm just blocking. I'm starting out by blocking. Now I want a 5-2-1 there, so from a 5 to a 5, but to a 4 there. So I've organized my fingering. It happens to be different from the one in this edition, which I don't like so much. Now you could put that together with the other hand. It almost sounds good like this, doesn't it? Idea. I didn't mean to do that, I meant to play a B here. So that would be the first thing I would do, and be able to do that from memory first. Now, when you want to work on the left hand, I think first thing I might do afterwards is this sort of thing. Just play each group fast. So I'm playing one hand block first, happens to be a single note, and then the next hand block 3 notes, and the next hand block 3 notes up then down. Then after that I would want to feel how one hand block connected to the next. Do you see what I'm doing there? And then no, it's there. approach this piece, Sheila. So you'd want to memorize your left hand and your right hand before you could feel really comfortable, I think. I hope that gives you some ideas anyway. Now, I think I'm in danger of running out of time. In fact, I have run out of time. It's now 1 o'clock and I should head off and let you head off. If I haven't answered any specific questions, individual questions, I'll do my best to do so in the comments underneath at some point later today, hopefully. So thank you so much for joining me from wherever you've called in from or watching from. And I'm going to be back again doing another one of these practice clinics at some point. Karen says, feeling inspired, but my husband has taken over my music room as an office. I don't know that I can do anything about that. Anyway, thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you again very soon. Bye-bye.